What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are back this week. And hey, next week we're going to start actually our 2022 season previews, starting with the Independent, the Group of Five. But this week, we're here to talk about, hey, who's next? What are the teams that have never made the college football playoff that are the next teams to make it? So, Daniel, this is a fun topic. I'm excited to talk about. I've got my big board. You've got your big board. What's your strategy going into this thing?
It's tough because I know that you and I have talked about how we're expecting this to just be strictly. We're expecting 4 teams to stay as the playoff. Um, kind of going back and looking, there's a couple of teams that you may not remember have been playoff teams because they were so early on. That are actually teams that I would put on this list as far as who's next.
I mean, Oregon,
Michigan State, like I like the direction both those programs are going. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, they made it when this thing first, set off in 2014 and 2015, I believe. For
Oregon won a playoff game.
Yeah. Well, that was because Jameis threw the ball like this when he was
one of the greatest plays in college football history.
Someone scared him. So yeah, that was DeForest Buckner, I believe, but no, that was wild. But yeah, anyways, that's kind of the strategy going in. I'm just trying to pinpoint who can maybe be a new conference winner and maybe a new coach. Is that going to help emerge something? Has a power shifted somewhere else in another conference? Is there going to be an at-large bid? The SEC seems to be putting 2 teams in every year. They'll just, pick a team that's going to finish with only one blemish in the SEC. That could work. So
love it. Well, here's how we're going to do this, Daniel. We're going to draft these teams. We're going to take turns. I'm about to flip a coin and we'll see who goes first. And then we'll go from there. We'll draft which teams are the next teams to make the college football playoff. All right, I'm going to flip a coin here on my phone. All right. Flip a coin. Oh, timeout. You need to call heads or tails.
That's important. Tails never fails. So
all right.
Let me get tails.
It is tails, Daniel. So you get to go first. And we'll just alternate. No snake draft because it's just the 2 of us. So
yeah,
Daniel,
that'd be weird.
What is your first pick for the next team to make the college football playoff? Who's number 1 on the big board?
In light of this past week, Jimbo versus Nick Saban, I'm just going to go ahead and go Texas A&M. I'm just going to go ahead and take them. One of my main keys for this is program sustainability, and there is some oil underneath that school. They got some money, They got some resources, and they got some recruits. And, say what you will, the whole, sliced bread, the whole, buying all the recruits, whatever we want to say. Jimbo has put an emphasis on recruiting since being there, upgrading the profile of player that's on that roster. And so strictly because of that alone, I think that they're going to get their way. They almost did it a couple years ago. I know they went 8-4. This has been a big punchline. They beat Alabama and still went 8-4. They're in the toughest division in the nation, the SEC West. And here's why I think it's so possible is they could just sneak in as an at-large bid because the SEC does that, and it could be this year. They could win all their games and lose to Alabama. Alabama goes and plays Georgia, beats Georgia in the SEC championship, and then they just get to piggyback Alabama and ride the coattails on in.
Sam has done
it.
Yeah. So Texas A&M is number 2 on my big board for that reason of a number 1. Every number 1 ranked recruiting class since 2010 has won a national championship. I think it's only a matter of time. With this recruiting class, it's a program built to sustain success. My caveat with them being 2 and not 1, I had them 1 at one point, was like you said, you got Bama in the division, and then Georgia's not going anywhere, so you're gonna have to go through both of those teams. Most likely, the most likely path is to go through both of those teams to get there. I think it's possible, and I think they can do it. That's why they were number 2 on my big board. But they were not number 1. So I actually get my number 1 pick. Dang, you're gonna be excited for this, my friend.
I can't hear it. Okay, USC.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I think it could happen as early as this year.
Oh.
So here's the reason USC is number one over A&M, honestly, and it's because the Pac-12 is a joke. So like,
Who was it that said that they expect that to happen this year? That
it was
it would be a
Brady Quinn.
disappointment.
Brady Quinn,
Brady
disappointing,
Quinn.
which I think too soon. It's not gonna be a disappointing season. They don't make it.
You can't say disappointment. Yeah.
No, I think. I mean, you went what? Did they have a losing season last year? I don't know. If you go 9-3, I think it's a great first year because there's a lot of work to do on both lines. Like that's
yeah.
the
Last
thing.
week when we talked to David about the over unders and everything, and we're going through USC's schedule after I went under on them or I went sell their stock, I was like, well, that schedule. I mean, if they figure a thing or two out.
I mean, there's no doubting the offense they just rebuilt with the transfer portal, skill position wise, is going to be as good as there is in the country.
I mean, Jordan Addison
but
adding in to that
yes,
already, Mario Williams and
Travis Dye, Caleb Williams, like they're going to light it. Like if they have time to throw the ball, they're going to light it up. But yeah, USC is poised to be successful. You've got a staff that can recruit out in USC now, and they've already proven that. You've seen what they can do through the transfer portal when you got the right guy at the helm at USC. USC has been a sleeping giant since Pete Carroll left, and they've now got the right guy at the helm. So again, I say in all seriousness, it could happen as early as this year. And because like you get them like a 12-1 Pac-12 champ that is USC is not getting left out of the playoff. So like they're just not. So for that reason, I have them above A&M for access. Like you're going to have a chance to win your conference easier than A&M will. And I mean, given their schedule this year, like I said, 10-2 is not off the table for this season. So 11-1 in that case is not off the table for this season. So I like USC. I like USC to make the playoff. They're my number one on the big board, my first pick in the first round. So we got USC and A&M off the board. They're number 1 and 2 on my big board. Daniel, what is your next pick?
I was going to say USC was my number 2. So, I think we're aligned there. I said before this was before we started recording, I mentioned to you how I had 3 that I think will happen in the next 5 years. And those first 2 I do think are going to happen in the next 5 years. And yes, the third one is Texas. So I have Texas as that third team. So I'm going to go ahead and take them. I think that path is a big deal. And I do think that window is important because they're going to move to the SEC soon. And I think that the next couple of years are critical if they're going to make it because Oklahoma changing over coaches. I still have high hopes for Oklahoma personally. I still think Oklahoma is going to do really well. But will Oklahoma have this stranglehold that they've had? And then there's been some emergence elsewhere, Baylor and Oklahoma State, these other teams. But does Texas finally have what they need to be aligned? Quinn Ewers, I do like these guys. I think that maybe sense of urgency is going to be on their side. They've always had money. They've always had resources. They've access to recruits, so we'll see. But, we're having to go outside the box with teams that haven't done it. And Big 12, betting on the Pac-12 and the Big 12, I feel like are safer bets because there's a lot clearer path for those teams. So Texas sounds like you said with USC, that brand identity. If Texas drops a game but still wins the Big 12, a 12-1 or 11-1, whatever it would end up being with Big 12, they would make it. So I'm here for it. Big 12 with Texas.
Texas is number 3 on my big board. That would have been my next pick. So I was hoping you'd outthink the room there. For all the reasons you said, path. I mean, the Big 12 is again, achievable, and I think the gap between them and Oklahoma is closing. Like especially with now Texas is the one with the more stable staff. Like now Oklahoma's had the turnover with their staff and stuff like that. So yeah, I like their chances again. It could be as soon as this year, but this is a long-term play as well. I think Texas is going to be in playoff contention moving forward. There's my opinions on Texas. Hey, I know I went big last year. I was a year early. Look, Sark had to get the bad apples off the roster. So,
or just get the Quinn Ewers on the roster.
Right. Right. Okay. So we've done Texas A&M, USC, then Texas. That was my tier 1. This team I almost put tier 1, but I think I dropped a tier here. All right. How about a school that has won national championships in this, or championship, I guess, in this century, in a conference that is manageable, in a division that is extremely manageable, in one of the most, if not the most talent-rich city in the country? Yeah, the U, Miami. So Miami, and again, I say with caution that it could happen this year. I'll say this. I think the most believable it could happen this year, of even those 4 teams, is probably Miami, because of path. Like, you get your shot at Clemson in the regular season, and you'll probably play them again for the ACC championship. Maybe we'll see. But like, although it's a year 1 staff, Miami was a top 40 team last year, top 30 teams by a lot of metrics, like in college football last year. So it's not like you're taking a team that was terrible. The staff gets fired because they were terrible. No, in fact, Manny Diaz, to try to keep his job, played a lot of young players the second half of the season when they got better. So all those guys got reps. So Cristobal is going to build a program here. Again, they're going to be a transfer portal destination, as they already have been, of like maybe some kids they missed out on to Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama in round 1, like, get homesick. They want to come home to Miami. And then again, you just get a few of these kids to stay home, you're going to have a top 5 class. Like, it doesn't take much in Miami. So players there, I love the staff Cristobal's put together. So again, path out of the ACC Coastal, who's really going to challenge you out of the Coastal? There's no definitive every year you're going to have this team in your way in the Coastal. So Miami, number 4 on my big board. Where were they on your board?
I really like it. No, I had them like 5 or 6. They're in that top 8. I like what you said though, and something that I've been considering is Miami. You're returning Van Dyke at quarterback, so it's like having a big checkbox like that, where it's at least you got that. You got Jake Garcia as his backup, so a couple of good QBs. But what Miami has struggled is Mario Cristobal's specialty. It's that line of scrimmage, the offensive and defensive lines of scrimmage. And if he can shore that up by notoriety, bringing players in, I mean, just in the city of Miami and Fort Lauderdale and Broward and Dade County, you're looking at just a ton of skill talent, where the problem is recruiting the lines of scrimmage in that area. You have to kind of go out elsewhere for that. So if he's able to kind of use his national pull and bring those players in, they won't have any problem bringing in the skill talent year in, year out to sustain it. So I think he might be the right guy, more so than rather, he's an ex-alum and all this kind of stuff. It might be positionally, he might be the right guy to bring in what's going to change their program. So I do like that. My actual team my next one, I had them at 3 for a while, and then Texas had kind of just overtaken them. And I said, okay, no, like, these are my big 3. This is my number 4. So they are a tick down. I do think those other 3 are a tier above. I'm going to take this team because I think they have a good shot at winning their conference this year, and doing so in impressive fashion because of the state of it. Utah. Yeah,
there you go. I was like, it's a different U. It's not quite the U.
Yeah,
it's like
so
a U.
What we definitely so Kyle Whittingham is just a solid head coach. I think he's number 10.5 out of 10. So he's just on the cusp of being in our top 10 of coaches, but has built such a strong, solid program in Utah. And they have been the class of the Pac-12 South, quite honestly, while these other, traditional teams like USC have been stubbing their toe. He's been hanging around. So, and they haven't had a quarterback until second half of last year, they got everything rolling. I guess after the first quarter of the season last year is when they got their quarterback correct, and then from that point on, it's been guns blazing. So I think that the state of the Pac-12 this year is such that Utah could win it, and they could win every game. They could. It's tough for me to just put that on them. I do think they're going to lose a game somewhere, and the reason that they're a little lower on the board is that I agree with what you said about USC. Is what I was saying about Texas. The brand itself, if it's a one-loss Pac-12 champion Utah, I think that's going to have there's going to be an issue putting them over maybe a team of like kind and quality from another conference. So if they're going to they can't get in there on their own. They're going to need something else to happen elsewhere. So, but that being said, I do think 12-1 is possible for them this year with a Pac-12 championship. With the state of where Oregon is going to be somewhat rebuilding, with the state of USC, new program, new coach, everything like this. These other teams, nobody's a monster in the Pac-12, so it's there for the taking. And I think that they're the most solid option if you had to pick somebody out there. So give me Utah, the Utes.
They were my next team, my big board. So completely agree with everything you said, and I hate to be keep being this trend, but yeah, that very likely that could happen this year. I try to have a mix of like this year plays versus long-term plays.
It's tough in the portal era to project more than a year or two without a team that's had sustained success.
Right. So I'm debating here now. I have it written in a certain order. I moved it down there. Okay. I made two lists and I moved one team ahead of the other on one list. Oh, I'm debating. Oh, okay. I know why I did that. All right. Penn State. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you the team I was debating them with, but I'll talk about it when it comes up. So Penn State, obviously they're in a division with Ohio State, but it's not like they haven't been close even as of recent. Like this is a team that, recently beat Ohio State, went to the Rose Bowl, like won their conference, and letting an Ohio State team that didn't win their conference like go to the College Football Playoff instead. So the good thing is, like, I think being the Big Ten East, you get a mulligan in that you can lose a game, go win the conference, and you're in, because that means you beat some other really good teams in the Big Ten East, including like you could lose to Ohio State, run the table, pray that Ohio State loses 2 games, or you beat Ohio State in the regular season, you're a game up now. You can still lose one, and then you beat Ohio State out of the East for now. Divisions are probably going to leave here very shortly in college football, but and then go in the Big Ten. So they've been close before. I think they're a quarterback away. When Sean Clifford exhausts his eligibility and Drew Aller goes in there, and they've recruited really well for Penn State. James Franklin, I feel like I gave him crap on our last episode or 2 episodes ago, but he is a program builder. I think they've had some bad luck with injury the last couple of years. Penn State's really good. I feel like people have forgotten about them. So they're my number 6 team, maybe 7, maybe 6. Still debating in my head, but I'll go Penn State.
And so you've got, was that your 3rd team?
That was my 3rd team. Yeah, we both have one more.
I'm going to give you my 4th team.
Yep.
And then you'll have your 4th team. So,
yep.
Okay. Sorry, thinking through this as we're going. So I've got my next team. So it was between, I have 4 teams here that are all very, very close as far as how I have them rated.
I've got 3 left.
Yeah. So I decided to go with the Big 12 school. Much of the reasons that I did this with Texas, just for how I think that they can make a little run. I'm going with Baylor. But I love the direction of the program under Dave Aranda. I think that he's already done so much with not having a quarterback. And I think if they ever figured that portion out where they had a difference maker at that position, and I think that you put everything else around him as far as what Aranda is going to be doing uh, going forward. I mean, the Big 12 is winnable. And then I think that you add in the fact of Texas and OU eventually moving to the SEC. I think you're looking at Baylor as a potential big dog in that conference, and especially with someone like Aranda, if he's staying long term, because his name got floated with some of these bigger jobs, and he signed a deal with Baylor to stay, and just got a raise and everything like that. So I like Baylor. I had a couple schools close, which I'll reveal those once you've revealed your last one. But yeah, I just like the trajectory of the program. It's mostly a play on Dave Aranda and the conference not being right now, not being any world beaters with OU and Texas, but even once they leave, there's going to be a vacuum, and I think that Baylor's going to be there, ready to do it.
I love it. So Baylor is a little bit lower on my list, which we can talk about here in just a minute. This is great.
I thought that they had made one back in the day. That's what worried me, and so I had to go back and look. But they were the first out with TCU.
Yeah, that 2014 year.
Yeah, that 2014 year. So
when they co-won the Big 12, even though they lost.
There's only one champion, one true champion, and they had two champions. It just didn't make sense.
Big 12 screwed themselves out of a playoff spot. Is what happened.
That's what they did.
This is great. The other team I was debating with, I get to just pick now, Wisconsin. So
that's the other one. Yeah, I had them there.
So Wisconsin, they don't have to play in the Big Ten East, which means you get a mulligan in your, you do the whole Georgia. You can go 12-0, lose your conference championship game, and then in a lot of years, I think you're still going to have a shot as you ran the table in the Big Ten. So you're able to say, like, we played in one of the toughest conferences in college football and still went 12-0. You lose a close game to Ohio State, or again, in some years you could avoid playing Michigan State, Penn State out of the East, Ohio State, and then in a one-game scenario on a neutral site in your conference championship, that's the environment you get to play them in. You control your
own.
Or
what if they get lucky and don't have to play Ohio State one year? If it's Penn State or someone else and they match up maybe a little bit better.
Wisconsin has gone 12-0, lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. They got spanked, and then got left out of the playoff in a year. Mm-hmm. So this has already happened. I don't know if that would happen again, where unless you just had a bunch of one-loss teams and it's, you got 4 conference champions. So yeah, Wisconsin, I was debating them in Penn State. So happy that they're still left there for me to take. Give me the Badgers. That's just, again, a solid program.
Yeah, I had them listed as well. I had one Big 12, one Big 10, and then I still have 2 SEC teams that are my first 2 out, which are Arkansas and Ole Miss. I'll just mention them. I just like trajectory of the program. They could get hot one year and do the one-loss thing. I don't think that they're capable of winning the conference with the current construct. It's just gonna be too tough having to go through Alabama and Georgia right now is what it appears. And then just a bunch of boogers on that side of the schedule. But Ole Miss had a good year last year. If they were able to replicate that and only lose one game to Alabama and then just follow them, like I said with Texas A&M before, I can see that kind of stuff happening. But yeah.
So I'll mention a few teams. Okay, here. So with your Baylor, I mentioned Oklahoma State as well. So Baylor was number 10 on my board, so up there still. I mean, yeah, we can only pick max of 8 teams total. So Baylor I like as a long-term play. Oklahoma State I wanted to mention, they were not high on my board. And it's because I'm selling all my Gundy stock, as I mentioned, especially this year. And it sucks because for a team that came so close last year, I mean, they were a play away from making it last year, that I'm out on them doing it in the next 5. I had a couple of teams that were this year plays. NC State was a this year pick of, I think they could do it this year, but that's not I think you're going to have the same chance the next 4 years versus a team that I think could have a chance this year and for the future is North Carolina. I would have put North Carolina above NC State for the ACC. They're the team that I debated putting at 8 with Florida. So And again, this is for sure. And this was where I'm glad you picked Baylor because then I could just stick my top 7. Like, Florida is definitely not a this year or next year play. Florida is a long-term play in that they brought in a recruiter at Florida, which is dangerous because like neither Miami nor Florida State have just taken the state by the throat in recruiting. And so like Napier coming in before either of those schools have done that, it's like, but Elliott's talked about this. I think 2 schools can be good in the state of Florida and recruit really well. I think it can sustain 2 like championship level teams. If Napier can recruit at Florida, I think Florida's a sleeping giant. And then similar to A&M, where it's like you've got Georgia in the division, and then you're going to have to play a monster out of the West. But kind of how you stay with A&M and with Ole Miss Arkansas is like you go 11-1, and like go let Georgia maybe get beat up by Bama. Maybe they're 11-1. They get their second loss to Bama in the SEC championship. Now you're sitting at 11-1 with a 7-point loss on a neutral field to Georgia and like dominant wins elsewhere. So I think Florida's very capable. I mean, I already done several SEC teams that I feel like could do that. I mean, Ole Miss, Arkansas are on my list, Tennessee, Auburn eventually. I mean, every coach at Auburn, like the last like 5 coaches have played for a national championship. So, I mean, I think Harsin's going to break that streak. But, hey, they're always right there, aren't they? I mean, they won it in 2010. So, BYU, I had on my list, especially with their imminent move to the Big 12. So, any of the schools you had written down? Or did you hit them all?
No, I just have my top 10 on the board. And so Ole Miss, Arkansas are the only 2 that were outside of the ones that we actually had. The other 8 were all picked by us. So
love it. All right. So in order, we had Texas A&M, USC, Texas, Miami, Utah, Penn State, Baylor, and Wisconsin as the next 8 teams we think will make the college football playoff. Hey, last year I'd have taken the top 4 versus the field, make the playoff, and I'd have been wrong with 2 first teams. So, hey, I mean, looking at this year, I don't know who's the most likely to make it for the first time just this year, but I mean, I'd love to see 2 of these teams make the playoff this year. Make for a fun season in college football.
It would be different for sure.
Hey, be sure to check us out on social media. We actually posted our post-spring rankings this past week. So with the top 3 of Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia, and hey, Texas A&M rounding out our top 4. Be sure to check out that entire top 25 of our power rating system on social media. You can follow us at the Extra Point Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And you can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. Hey, we'll see you next week for our Group of 5 independent preview. And that will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I'm Jacob.